First off, I especially want to thank staff here at the school. You guys have done a wonderful job making us feel welcome. This is a great trip for us. Especially want to thank, in the back, translators. I've had personal translators for 2 days here. I'm extremely grateful. For this in English, I try to keep my English simple, but if anybody wants to grab headphones, go ahead. Or please interrupt me if I'm too fast or it's, some word you don't understand. It's very informal. I love Georgia. I love the Caucasus. I live there by choice. I've been there on and off since 2003. But 2016 is going to be a very difficult year for Georgia. Extremely difficult. It's a country that's blessed with natural resources. Those natural resources in 2016 are not valued by the economy, by the world economy. Capitalism is kind of letting Georgia down this year, and I'll explain why. We have one gold mine. Higher? Okay. We have one gold mine, and price of gold since 2013 is flat. So gold miners lose their jobs, hundreds of them. We have one silicomanganese mine. Ukrainians probably know what that is. That's a substance, a few drops of it go into the making of steel. It's the last little thing that takes moisture out of steel and makes it strong. Our factory, our mine, is owned by Kolomoisky, your friend. This substance, which is very difficult to mine, very difficult to smelt, very difficult to transport, is worthless on the world market right now. Nobody is building steel anywhere in the world. The price has collapsed. Hundreds of people have been laid off from their job, at least until May in Georgia. The company, Kolomoisky's company, has a factory in America to finish this process. I've been to that factory. There are 74 people working at that factory now. They've all lost their jobs in America. It's a valuable natural resource. Sometimes it's very valuable. Right now, it's basically worthless. Hundreds of people have lost their jobs. We have one significant coal mine. That one is owned by Georgians. They've guaranteed that they will buy the product for a few years. That mine is closed right now by strikes, low prices. Men have been standing outside for 14 days. This is a dangerous mine. We've had deaths, every year, for the last 5 years, there's been deaths in this mine. They're not working. Our other natural resource is water. Water rushing downhill, mostly from the Caucasus. Georgia has almost maniacally been building dams and trying to build dams. I looked at a list before I came here. At one point, very recently, we had 84, in this tiny country you're looking at here, we had 84 dam projects. One of them for $1 billion, some of them smaller, all at the same time. No economy on earth can support that. These dams cost billions of dollars to build collectively. And in the end, they produce electricity for a country where if we raise the rate of electricity for people $1 a month, it's an issue. So the actual value of this incredible natural resource right now is not high. Now, if you notice, I've said nothing about politics yet, because none of this has anything to do with politics. This is the world economy. This is some bad luck. This is capitalism. But it's nothing to do with Georgia or even EU or anything else. This is the world. That's the path we have to look at first this year. We have to look at the fact we're not going to have much money to play with to do anything. Okay? The talk, of course, is the path to the EU, and you can see, like the other countries, I love maps. From Georgia, there is no path. I chose this map on purpose. Nino let me share it. I picked it carefully because, as Georgians, the Black Sea is like the Atlantic Ocean or bigger. Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, to a certain extent, even Ukraine, we act like it's 2 million miles away. It's not in our daily conversation, it's not in our economics, which we'll deal with a little bit more this afternoon. My own organization, I work for Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. We have one of our main offices in Romania, we have partners in Moldova, Kiev Post is a good partner, we have partners in Ukraine. We can't communicate. Even as journalists, moving documents back and forth, language, travel. Sometimes I get so frustrated with our partners that I said, sometimes, how about if I just swim across, it'll be faster. You know, we can't get, it's not that we don't get along, but we don't mix. And that is our direct path. For Georgia, that is the direct path to the EU. But we don't use it. What I want to do with the map very quickly before we talk about the West is I just want to start at 3 o'clock and just for you guys quickly just go around our relationships with the countries in our region. Had Mr. Saakashvili come this afternoon, he had a foreign policy. He was all foreign policy. Some people would say the things he did inside the country, good and bad, were all part of his foreign policy. Everything was done with an eye for what did the West think of it, what did the US think of it. He was followed by a government that had no foreign policy. It was not a focus for them. First Prime Minister never went to the United States, barely went to Europe other than Davos. Not his thing. So foreign policy, such as it's been until very recently, pretty close to home. We'll start with Azerbaijan, which has a huge influence in Georgia, for those of you who are not familiar. SOCAR, which is a national oil company, is generally the biggest taxpayer in Georgia. It pays for free heat for all our monasteries, our churches. Huge thing in Georgia, the Patriarch. Huge system in Georgia. They give that to us free. Until recently, they sponsored our football team. They sponsored Olympic Committee. They sponsored our chess team. Despite that, relationships, especially between people, are very rocky. And I blame media. I blame us a lot. When I first came to the region in 2003, it was fairly normal for Gustavi, for our major media outlets, to go to Baku to understand what was going on there, to report on it as part of the region. The downside to the NATO-EU passion, for want of a better word, is we've turned so much in this direction, we pay no attention to the people who keep us warm every night, right or wrong. We pay no attention to the political problems there, which are interesting. We pay no attention to the human rights problems there, media problems, which can have a very direct effect on us. We don't look in that direction at all as citizens. This is a huge mistake. Huh?
Trying to change it.
Slowly. Armenia. I can tell you a story about one of our graduates. He's in State TV, International Relations Department. He's got a pretty good job. And he was sitting in a control room with the head of State TV, and all of a sudden he sees the leader of his country signing an agreement with Russia. And he starts screaming at his boss, not about the politics, saying, my God, no satellite time, no stand-ups, nobody in Moscow. How am I supposed to cover this? Why didn't you tell me? Why couldn't we prepare? He's screaming at him as a professional. The head of State TV looked at him and said, nobody told me. It was a shock to Armenia, so of course it was a shock to Georgia. Relationship right now, there's not a lot of trade back and forth because there's not a lot to trade back and forth. An unfortunate thing, and it was brought up earlier, is the populist anti-Armenian language is returning. Probably a little more than it should. No reason why. There is no threat here, there's no economic threat, there's no political threat. It's populism, we've got an election year coming. talk a little more about Armenia and Iran a little later. Turkey. I'm always amazed. My own organization, OCCRP, even gatherings like this, everything like that, that's the black hole. You know, this huge country can be such a positive influence between all of us, and they're not in the room a lot of times, and in a lot of forums. From Georgia's standpoint, we have a little bit of economy with them. Again, there's this dream that they're going to buy electricity from us, as if electricity costs any in the world more than a few cents, you know, like this is a huge product. We have a little bit of economy with them because Batumi has become a casino town right on the border. So our statistics look huge, number of people coming to visit Georgia. And in fact, many of them come for 4 hours, go to the casino, do something else bad, and go back. Okay? But this border is interesting for another reason, and it's Syria. Now, I talked to 2 of my reporters last night when I left here on Skype, and yesterday they met a gentleman. They were in the mountains in Ajar, which is our southern region next to Turkey, and he introduced himself, and they talked to him for a while, and he said, well, I'll be going to Syria soon, and I'll be fighting for ISIS. Period. Not hiding it. This is a very easy route for Northern Caucasus people into Georgia, through Turkey, into Syria. Not a closely guarded border at all. We don't know what the future brings, but we know we're an open gate there, and everybody knows it. As I said before, then we come to the Black Sea. And the fact that we don't routinely, all of us, and I'm talking about Georgians, you know, talk about myself, we don't get on a boat in Batumi, we don't go to Bulgaria, we don't go to Romania, you know, we don't do a boat and a hike, we don't go to Moldova. No reason. I'll let the Georgians speak to that. And I'm a little nervous here only because I shouldn't be speaking for Georgians. I'm happy to be speaking here, but I'm speaking about them. We never visit. We've got this mentality that Georgia, we're going to fly to Germany. We're going to fly over zone. This is ludicrous. And that's why, you know, a conference like this is great. Get people thinking about it a little bit. Ukraine, again, I want to save a little bit of the economics for this afternoon and for Barry's talk. But for most Georgians, revolution in 2005, there was blanket coverage by Rustavi 2, by our stations. Saakashvili has never made a secret of the fact that his happiest years were here as a student. I remember one time he came on a state visit, I think it was even around the holidays, around 2005, I think he stayed for 11 days. He loves it here. We had coverage in 2005, end to end, hours and hours. Since he's come back, for Georgians, that's mostly their impression of Ukraine, because again, Rustavi 2, for political reasons, for personal reasons, whatever you want to call it, business reasons. Every time he sneezes in Ukraine, you hear God bless you in Georgia, because it leads the news. And that, right or wrong, for most Georgians, that's what Ukraine is. Okay? Russia. We do now have some trade with Russia. But I call it whim trade in English. I apologize for translation. Whim trade is, we can sell them wine, and on a whim they can say, doesn't meet our standards, gotcha, that, stop. We can sell them Borjomi, on a whim, politically they can say, ooh, there's arsenic in it. Well, yes, there's arsenic in it. Stop. There's no good long-term plan here. Now, this government, with some justification, says, look, we've normalized relationships a little bit. There's some trade, there's some economy. boy, it's nothing you can depend on. There's no, you want to talk about 5-year plans. You've got to be on a 5-minute plan if you're a businessman in Georgia and you're dealing with Russia. I want to talk about water again a little bit. This is kind of interesting. There are 2 stories. Abkhazia. There's a dam called Enguri, and the wall is in Georgia, but all the equipment, all the electricity, all the stuff is in Abkhazia. All the transformers, everything is in Abkhazia. The line is right at the dam, basically. And again, getting away from politics totally, we haven't had any rain. The water level is so low in the dam that they can barely produce any electricity at all. This is, I think it's 75% of Abkhazia's electricity comes from this dam. A good amount of ours from northwestern Georgia come from this dam. Now, fortunately, we have a pragmatic relationship on this side of the country. Russia is selling electricity to Georgia at a reasonable rate, emergency rate, and we're supplying it back to Abkhazia. Despite the political situation, Georgia has the political and the moral obligation to keep the lights on in Abkhazia. So they do it. In this case, the Russians have very professionally sold electricity at an affordable rate for this period right now, this emergency period, until we get rain, some more melt, something, and we're able to keep the lights on in Abkhazia. This is 2016, not the 90s. Ossetia, different kind of water. You've heard the statistics here that these 2 areas, that this is 20% of Georgia, which there's no effective control of it by the Georgian government. I would argue that that number is low, and I'll tell you why. I'd be very interested in particularly the Moldovan experience and to a certain extent what's going on in eastern Ukraine, which is when you put barbed wire up, you don't just set a line right at the border. That area around the barbed wire dies. It withers. So all these towns south of South Ossetia, maybe 10, 15 kilometers south, they're in Georgia, they're dying. They're dying because of water. The irrigation system, the Soviet irrigation system, takes water from the Caucasus down through South Ossetia into these villages. In tit-for-tat politics, tit-for-tat economics, Georgia cut off electricity for Ossetia at one point. In return, irrigation shut off. Now all of a sudden you're living someplace you can't grow anything. We don't get enough rainfall by ourselves. We need the irrigation. So what happens in these towns? First, you have no water, you don't grow any crops, people start moving away. Then the store closes. There's not enough people, there's not enough money there. When the store closes, nobody fixes the road because nobody's going there anymore. Now it's a mud path. You're back in the 19th century, not the 20th century. You're better off with your horse than you are with the car going through the mud. I was just there last Saturday at a village. And this is a Caucasus, this is a Central Asian story. This is a family that, ethnic Azerbaijan, spent time in Kyrgyzstan. In the 90s, post-Soviet, they decided to try Georgia. They came to Georgia at kind of a nationalistic time. I'm choosing my words carefully here. In their story, they were made not to feel welcome. So they went to rural Russia. In the late 90s, again, a nationalistic time, I choose my words carefully, they were made not to feel welcome. They came back to Georgia, and they find themselves now, to the south of them, is our main road. We have one main road, east-west road across the country. The actual fence, South Ossetia fence, is now 500 meters from that road. Okay? Forgetting armies, and we'll talk about armies this afternoon in the other presentation. They can cut our country in half in minutes. They almost did it the first time in 2008. Now it's so close, it's not even funny. The checkpoint for the Georgians, as soon as you get off the highway, is in 100 feet. There's a Georgian checkpoint for these villages. It's about 500 meters to the barbed wire. This family's living in the middle. Okay? This is not some ignorant peasant family. In one of the ironies, one of their ancestors taught Georgian language in a school in North Ossetia. They've got fast internet on their phone. They joined us at Facebook in 3 minutes. Boy, are they trapped. So it's not 20%. And again, I'd be very interested in the experience in the other two countries. I think when you measure, where these lines are, the map doesn't do it justice. That's a lot closer to Tbilisi, a lot easier for us to focus on. But again, going back to relationships with Russia, pragmatic in one place, pretty painful in the other. And I think that describes the relationship right now as we stand here today. I wish there were Russians in the room. I would love to have this discussion always. One of the things that I've enjoyed about the last 3 days here is, even though we had a guest yesterday, and there's talk about EU, NATO, and things like that, the message from everybody has been, what can we do ourselves? I've picked 3 things that I think Georgians can work on this year. And I apologize, this is kind of Georgia focused, because that's what the talk is going to be. I would say 2 things. 1, think about it for your own country. And 2, because we're journalists, I'm going to take the liberty to maybe suggest a couple stories, a couple story ideas of things you can do in your own country, or think about doing, because we're going to try them here. First one is our court system, which is and remains a travesty from top to bottom. It has earned no trust from the Georgian people whatsoever. You can be Ustavi too, have money, be a very powerful media company, right or wrong, go in the courtroom, and have no faith whatsoever in a fair judgment. You can be the smallest businessman, the smallest individual citizen, go into the courtroom, have no expectation of justice. I've been lucky. I have worked in a lot of countries and a lot of regions. And one way I kind of look at quality of legal systems is the quality of defense attorneys. And in a system that really doesn't work, in a system where you don't expect justice, you don't expect the evidence to be the deciding factor, you don't expect good judgment, you don't expect common sense, you have bad defense attorneys. Because it's a useless job. Doesn't pay well, you don't get good clients, and you lose. And at the risk of insulting some of your friends, we have horrible defense attorneys. When we're in covering stories, we go to talk to defense attorneys, we come out and go, my God, what hope is there for a client? Here's a story, just an example. Here's a story we're going to do and you can even think about doing. And this gets to using journalism and using data and using information that's available in some of our countries. We just took a very basic premise, which was our judges do have to file forms on, for instance, what money they owe. So we took the data on our judges and saw what banks they borrowed money from, legitimately for houses or whatever. Made one database. Then we took a second database of the cases they ruled on. Again, it's just word search. And we'll find a judge who owes $60,000 to our 3rd largest bank, for instance. Legitimately. but it's a lot of money in Georgia, $60,000. We find that he's ruled on 55 cases involving this bank that he owes a huge amount of money to. And when we ask him, we ask his superiors, and we ask overseers of the system, why is that a problem? One of the things Georgia is going to try to do this year is go to an electronic system for selection of judges for cases. This is an interesting topic, that's why I bring it up to journalists. We don't look at this so often. Who picks the judges, for the cases? That can be a very powerful tool in the wrong hands. But it's deeper than that. Citizens have contempt for the court system. The court system has contempt for citizens. Information in a democracy really does belong to you guys, belongs to the people. Literally belongs to you. You pay for the paper, you pay for the laptops, you pay for the server time, you pay for the people, put it together. That's your money. Georgia court system, like so many others, no. You want results from cases? No. You want basic information? Fight for it. You want to talk to a judge? No. This is a daily battle. We've got a story going this Sunday, a plagiarism case. And this is judges who ended up with their answers on their tests that are copy-paste from the instructor's own writings, their own legal writings. We're asking us freedom of information. We want to see video of the tests. We want to know who programmed the tests, how this worked. No. So again, I go back 13 years of sitting in conferences of Georgians, of particularly Americans, going in and saying rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. Doesn't help. That's a Georgian decision. That's a Georgian cultural decision. Only Georgians can decide, is it okay for a judge to rule on cases when he owes the bank, thousands of dollars? Is that okay? But it's something they can do themselves. Okay. Banking, something Georgians can do themselves. In one respect, we're lucky. The banking system is healthy. Azerbaijan has had 20 banks either close, merge, or it's going to close in the last year. Okay? Chaos. Our banks are strong, they're stable, but they don't loan money to people. A small businessman there, it's extremely difficult to get capital at any rate you can afford to get started. And worse, they're the biggest competitors in the market for small businessmen. I'll tell you why. Because they go into business themselves. We have two banks in particular. I'm not picking on them. I mention them only because they're on the London Stock Exchange, which means the records are open to the whole world. They have to be transparent, painful as this is to them. One's called Bank of Georgia, one's called TBC Bank. Good corporate citizens, by the way. Good supporter of the arts, good supporter of a lot of things. A lot of positives about these banks. But because they use their capital, Bank of Georgia has 61 daughter companies, most of them in healthcare, building clinics, things like that. It squeezes out the private businessmen who want to get into the healthcare business. Private Georgian businessmen, people want to borrow some money, start something. How do you compete in the market? How do you compete with a bank for capital? They're building all the clinics. They're hiring all the people, and private business can't get into it. TBC Bank has 10 daughter companies, as we understand it, and they're huge. They just signed a $250 million more contract to start a new port on the Black Sea, with an American company. Them as the builder, so. And again, in a small country like Georgia, I told you the jobs we don't have, the natural resources, and may never have again in any numbers. So where are the jobs going to be? Maybe building a port or something like that. For a small businessman to get a chance to get into this, extremely difficult. Again, I said these banks are good corporate citizens, sorry. But they have their own arrogance. There's a new book out now, and if anybody's interested, we can go Google it later. And the theory in the new book is that since 2009, central banks in all our countries are so powerful. They're unelected. The money policy in our countries, how much currency to buy, how to keep, our shrinking currency afloat. But central banks are vital. In Georgia, central bank has been weakened by this administration politically to the point that the central bank went to these two banks and said, by decree, you need to get out of these businesses, your banks. Your mandate, your license, whatever you want to call it, make money available, capital, make a profit, please make a profit. Loan to citizens, loan to small businesses at interest rates that are at least better than mafias, something. Nothing happened. So then they said to them, okay, by December 31st, 2015, submit to us your plan for how you're going to run all these daughter businesses, so we at least understand clearly what you're doing. This week we went to the central bank and asked for documents, asked for these documents from the two banks, and they just looked at us and said, go ask the banks. She tells us they didn't even bother writing a piece of paper, didn't bother. So this is something Georgians can do this year. Again, how much advice from World Bank, EU banking system, Americans and everything else. You have a lot of advice. These are Georgian decisions, Georgian society decisions. For the rest of you, think a little bit about how your central bank works. And it's not necessarily an investigation, but just understand the relationship between the central banks and your leading banks and what it means for trying to borrow money. These are people stories in the end. Is there any future for small businessmen in your country? Well, actually, we've got one here. We can ask them this afternoon. Is there any future in trying to borrow money and staying in the system? How can you think about a future? Do you have access to money you can afford? These are internal things. EU is not going to save us on this. NATO is not going to save us on this. These are things we've got to figure out ourselves. Third one that Georgians have to do themselves this year, and topic in all three countries always, they have to do an election this year. When we came over here on the bus 3 days ago, we were sort of talking, well, do you think, will be a violent one or not? It's early, it's scheduled for October. Unfortunately, yesterday, one of our opposition parliamentarians was shot, 3 times in the legs. He's new husband of one of our graduates. And to give you an idea, Georgia is also a small country. She lost her job as a talk show host on state TV because she's perceived to be biased because she married this guy recently. So she lost her job 2-3 weeks ago. He was shot yesterday 2 or 3 times. We don't know. We don't know. Georgia had 2012, the last time, pretty good election. Our guest, who's not coming this afternoon, would respectfully disagree with the result, but the process was pretty good. What people, including Georgians, tend to forget is we have not had an elected prime minister for 3 years now. When Mr. Ivanishvili won in 2012, he rather quickly said, I will do this for a year, I will straighten things out, and I will hand to another. And that's exactly what he did. He worked about 1 year exactly. He handed it to a young man who, I think fairly, you can say, struggled with it for 2 or 3 years, a couple years. He's just handed it off to somebody else. We have a new one now. It's interesting in this respect that we really don't know who the next one's going to be. Polling in Georgia is a dangerous thing. There were polls in 2012 that had Misha winning by 40 points. You know, it's an inexact science there for a lot of reasons. But most polls now agree that maybe 60% of people say, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Huge number in any country. So we have no idea what the process is going to be. And when we say we don't know who's going to win, we got no idea, as we sit here right now. On paper, the ruling party has 10–15% popularity. National Movement, the same. I want to go back to the court system for a second. Zviad's a modest man, but if you look deep in his resume, and actually it's printed here, one of his tasks right now is he works on behalf of the government of Georgia on the Pardon Commission. And the reason the previous administration is so unpopular is many people went to jail for very long sentences for crimes that probably didn't fit these 7, 8, 9-year sentences. You can go into almost any household in Georgia, and someone will say, my son, my grandson, my nephew is doing 8 years for marijuana, is doing 10 years for grabbing a chain. Bad things, things to be punished for, but long sentences. So Zviad has this job as head of the Pardon Commission in Georgia right now. And I can tell you there's no job in hell that is worse than that job. Both the politics and the court system together, his phone could ring 24 hours a day. And that's why National Movement is just inherently unpopular. We have third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties. Maybe somebody comes out of that. Too early to tell. Really too early to tell. That's the third thing. God help you with the observers and everything else, but that's the third thing Georgians can do themselves. That's 2016. Our Moldovan students asked me a question yesterday. What's more important for Georgia, NATO or EU? And answer for that, I think, pretty clearly is NATO. I love the way Americans play with words. We say NATO is not in Georgia. The Georgian Defense Secretary, she, in very bellicose language, has again said, we need to be in NATO now, you're going to put us in this year. Unlike 2008, NATO's reply this time was, and there'll be no unclarity like there was in 2008, is not happening. There'll be the meeting in May, but not happening. But at the same time, when, and I don't say if, when you all come to visit us in Georgia, and the door is open, please come see us. You'll fly into the airport, which is 15 kilometers east of the city. Another 15 kilometers east of the city is a military base. On that base is Georgian soldiers, the famous American advisors, tanks and weapons, practicing war. The myth of America, we don't have army bases in these places. I mean, what else do you want to call that? NATO is there. NATO is there. This makes Putin, this makes the Kremlin furious. But they're there. For Georgians, that's a lot more important. My time is up. I'm going to say two things positive, okay, because we have to. One is, and it's an American program. I have nothing to do with it. The one positive this year, there's a $140 million program in education to work on physics, math, engineering, natural sciences. This is huge for Georgia. When the Russians left and they took their technical help, they took their files, they took everything, we lost a generation of science. This is a very positive thing. I'm really looking forward to it. The other one, very quickly, is the media. Media is so much better now than it was 12 years ago. When I came 12 years ago, there were weekly papers around the country that could barely survive, didn't know what to put in them. Now we've got websites, daily websites in all the regions. We've got breaking news. We've got live news. It changes everything. 4 years ago during the election, the party was elected because they could go into a village and say, we're going to raise pensions. Everybody clapped and they won. It's bullshit. Bullshit then. It's bullshit now. They won't be able to do it this time. People know better. Thank you.
Thank you, David.